Hello, roller coaster gamers. It's Mr. No right here. It's been a while, but I am making my top 10 roller coasters of 2023 video. I just recently, this past weekend, went to Hershey Park, so I've gotten some new credits. So I'm going to update this list and also some other roller coasters like the new Air Force one that opened at Fun Spot Atlanta. So I'm going to be updating my top 10 favorite roller coasters. So we'll first be starting off with honorable mentions. Some of these were on my list last year, but have since been moved off. One of them is one that I've ridden recently that's on here, and another is one that I rode before that the list I made last time, but um, it wasn't on the list. But I decided that hey, I want to make it an honorable mention, and that's Raptor, which is the B&M invert at Cedar Point. Now, I remember that one being so good. Like it's probably tied for my favorite invert, right with Montu, which is why both of them are in here. Montu's the invert at Busch Gardens Tampa. Both of them are just really intense, really fun, and they just had to be an honorable mention. And then I have Twisted Cyclone, which was on the list last year, but since gotten knocked off. It's not bad. It's an RMC, so it's got to be good. But it's probably the weakest of the RMCs that I've done. If you don't know what RMC means, RMC is short for Rocky Mountain Construction. They take old wooden coasters and they put steel track on them and make them smooth, make them go upside down, make them do some wild things, and just make them much better. Now, and interestingly, Top Thrill Dragster, at least in the form I wrote it when I went to Cedar Point, it will no longer exist. Basically, they're taking out the hydraulic launch and they're putting in a magnetic launch, an LSM, and they're making it have a backwards and forward section. They're changing the ride completely, so I don't know what that experience is going to be like, but the Top Thrill Dragster that I experienced had probably the craziest launch ever, and for that alone, it's got to be on here. And then the last honorable mention is Fair Night, which I just rode recently at Hershey Park, and I was pleasantly surprised by that. It was really fun. It was really intense, and the vertical lift hill and beyond vertical drop is intimidating and everything. But I've ridden other roller coasters that have the vertical lift hill. I've ridden Mystery Mine, Daredevil Dive, Rip Ride Rocket. But the thing is, with some of those roller coasters, like Rip Ride Rocket, for example, the vertical lift hill is kind of the scary part about it, or like the main like gimmick. With this roller coaster, that's not the case. In fact, I think the most memorable part of this is probably the other elements, like the Norwegian loop, I think it's called, and the double corkscrews are pretty whippy, and there's one airtime hill right at the end of the ride that gives you some really good ejector. So I have these on here. These are my honorable mentions. They just barely missed my top 10, so we'll get into those now. So number 10 is Mako at SeaWorld Orlando. This is a B&M Hypercoaster, built in 2016, I believe, and it's my favorite B&M Hypercoaster I've ridden. Now, short story. Unfortunately, I did miss out on Candemonium at Hershey Park. Basically, the first day we were at the park, we went to the park for 2 days. The first day we were at the park, it was cold and rainy, and it was open then, but me and the group I was with were like, maybe we don't want to ride the biggest roller coaster in the rain. So we were thinking, we're going to be back the next day. It's not going to be raining tomorrow, so we'll ride it tomorrow. We come back the next day, and then it's closed for the whole day because of the slightest of wind. It was a little bit breezy. It wasn't too bad, but they closed it for it. So, unfortunately, that I did miss out on Candemonium, and that was the only major credit besides maybe Super Duper Looper that I missed out on at Hershey Park. So I don't know if that could have ended up being my favorite B&M Hyper, but Mako is still my favorite B&M Hyper that I've ridden. it's smooth. It's got really good floater airtime. There's that one nice speed hill halfway through the ride, and some call the twisted finale at the end kind of boring, but I enjoy. I like going over the water and stuff. It's very pretty to look out. One of my favorite color schemes of any roller coaster too, and it was just, it's not like the most insane thing to exist, but it's just fun, you know. I enjoyed getting my 3 rides in on it when I visited SeaWorld Orlando. I got to get back there to do a pipeline at some point, so yeah. Next one is Air Force One. This is the RMC hybrid coaster that opened at Fun Spot Atlanta this year. It's a ground up hybrid coaster, so this was not a conversion. This was built from the ground up, and I probably overhyped it a little bit going in. I was expecting it to be like, oh, crazy, but I think, and I wouldn't say it exceeded those expectations. I would say it either met or was slightly below, mostly because of the ending. The ending has these 4 sharp airtime hills back to back to back, which are, you know, give really good airtime, but it's almost too much, like, and to the fact where they almost hurt your legs, especially if you're sitting in the back. So I think this might be a forever ride, because especially for some of the elements, like there's this low to the ground turn at some point in the ride that's really intense, and there's the inversion that goes right over an arcade that's in the park, and that part's really good. I think that's this inversion right here. That's one of my favorite inversions, and there's a really good double up element. The zero G stall is good. The dive loop element's good. I think if the ending was a little bit better, and also when you go into the brake run, if you're in the back, you get slammed into those brakes. Like, it's a very short brake run. I think maybe that instead of having 4 airtime hills, they could have had like 2 or something, and it would have been plenty, because there's plenty of airtime on this ride already, and made the brake run a little bit longer so you're not slamming to a stop. And I think if they did that, this could have been a 10 out of 10. But because of that ending, it pushed it down a little bit for me, but it's still an awesome ride. This is at least an 8.5 to 9 out of 10. So that's where I place Air Force One. And number 8 is Skyrush. This would be higher if my first ride didn't give me, you know, a pain in my legs. So basically, this is an infamous roller coaster. This is one of the most polarizing roller coasters to exist. This is an Intamin hypercoaster at Hershey Park. It's kind of a wing coaster too, because, you know, the two outer seats are, you know, hanging over the track a little bit, but it's a 200-foot tall Intamin coaster. So it's just a hyper coaster to me. But the famous thing about this ride is, you know, there's people who ride it and love it for the airtime and the intensity, and then there's the other people who ride it and just can't stand it because of the lap bars crushing their thighs. This roller coaster often gets nicknamed Thigh Crush. And I was going in, and even with the people calling it Thigh Crush and saying it's bad, this was still my most anticipated roller coaster when I went to Hershey Park, and I had 2 rides. I got 2 rides on it. The first one, I sat in the back. I sat on the right wing seat, and I did get thigh crushed about halfway through the ride, and it did kind of ruin the second half of the ride for me. And it was shakier than I was expecting. I never really heard any complaints about it being rough or anything, but there in the back it was a little bit rattly. It didn't give me a headache or anything, but I definitely did notice a bit of shakiness there. And I was like, okay, I need to ride it again before I make a full opinion on this. So I go on it later that night, and I get a night ride on it. I'm in the front row on the left wing seat, and it was amazing. I did not get thigh crushed, and it was just an excellent ride. But I did have a strategy of trying to get the lap bar, because the thing is with these lap bars is the G-forces on some of those low bank turns are so strong that they push cause the lap bar to get lowered down on you. They kind of push it into you. So what I had to do is I had to hold the lap bar forward. Like I had to like hold it in place so it didn't go down. And that did prevent it from crushing me, which made it the ride so much better. But I still wouldn't place it higher than 8 because the fact that I have to do that to have an excellent ride is kind of hinders it a little bit, because I want to be able to hold my hands out free and everything. But on this ride, you can't really do that, or else the lap bar just crushes your legs. So if you don't get thigh crushed, then this is excellent. And then the front row was smoother as well. It was intense. The airtime was fantastic. The first drop, before I go on to the next one, the first drop on this is probably my favorite part. The first drop is weird. So it's like you're going down this drop, right? And you feel like you're at the maximum like degree. And then it goes in on itself a little bit. It's like halfway down the drop, it gets steeper all of a sudden, and it's weird. And in the back row, you got like flung over. It was really one of the craziest drops I've ever experienced. So that's where Sky Rush places for me. Now, number 7 is Hagrid's Magical Creatures Motorbike Adventure. Long title. Oh god. So this is the replacement for Dragon Challenge at Universal Islands of Adventure, but to be honest, that was all the way back in 2017. It feels like it was just yesterday that I rode Dragon Challenge, but yeah, this is by far the best family coaster I've ridden. A family coaster has made it onto my top 10. Crazy, right? But no, this is one of the most elaborately themed roller coasters ever. The architecture and everything, the little creature, like the unicorn that appears halfway through the ride, the motorbikes, like if you're sitting on the motorbike seat, you feel like you're going in through the dark forest. The motorbike is really cool, and there's some really neat surprises that I probably won't get into the spoilers of. Maybe go watch a POV, but there are some tricks up this ride's sleeve that you probably don't know about just looking at these images. But like, there's good indoor sections, and then at night, I unfortunately when I went, I did not get to experience it at night. But like, next time I go, I definitely need to ride this at night, because during the day it was already amazing. Now, the only reason it doesn't place higher is because it is a family coaster. The most intense part of the ride is probably at the very last launch. This thing has like 7 launches on it, which is crazy. But yeah, this is just one of the most fun, exciting roller coasters ever, and like, I don't think there's anyone who would get off this like unsatisfied. Like, this ride just, it's doing what it's like. It succeeds at what it's trying to do, which is trying to be a full themed family coaster, and it's just perfect. It's a 10 out of 10 family coaster. Number 6 is Millennium Force. I rode this when I went to Cedar Point back in 2019 for my 16th birthday, and by the time I was going to Cedar Point, I had heard a lot of people saying that this roller coaster is overrated, that it's forceless, it's far from the best at Cedar Point, blah 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 blah. And I was kind of going in like, okay, this, and before I rode this, I had rode Fear 325 at Carowinds, which I was obsessed with at the time. So I was like, I know this isn't going to be as good as Fury. This is going to be an alright Giga coaster. But I was, honestly, I think this ride is underhyped a little bit. Like, of course, it's not like compared to roller coasters being built nowadays, it's definitely not. It doesn't have as interesting of a layout. Like, most of it is, overbanked turns, your occasional airtime hill and stuff. But I did not think it was forceless. I don't know what that's all about, because I was graying out on that first turn, especially when I rode in the front row. Like, this is a fairly intense ride, to be honest. Like, and it's got some good airtime moments. The first drop is amazing. It's got one of the best views of any roller coaster of Lake Erie at the top. And this thing looks good at night, like the lighting of the lift hill and everything. I thought, like, gliding, like people say you're gliding around the track at 93 miles per hour. That was fun to me. Like, I like whizzing through the park at like 93 miles an hour going through these elements. Like it was a lot of fun, and it was definitely worth riding. Like, and of course, as is every roller coaster at Cedar Point. Cedar Point is one of the best amusement parks ever. So, yeah. Number 5 is Wildcat's Revenge. This is my favorite roller coaster at Hershey Park, and it's hard to see why. It's one of the most recent. It is the most recent Rocky Mountain construction conversion. There used to be this wooden coaster built by GCI called Wildcat, which is in this picture, and people were complaining that it was rough. That it's the one roller coaster in Hershey's lineup that isn't good compared to everything else. That's like outstanding. It was the one kink in their lineup, and people were wanting this to be arm seat so bad, and they eventually got it. And this was excellent. Like, this has got like a twister layout, but GCI's wooden coasters kind of go all around doing crazy twists and turns, and they took that layout and did the best they could with it. And they honestly, this was pleasant for it. It's not even one of the biggest arm seats. It's only 140 feet, but it feels taller than that, and I can't remember exactly the top speed, but it feels like it's faster than it actually is going. It's because of the twisted layout, how it's going in and around itself. You're going underneath all this wood structure and stuff, and it makes it feel like you're going a lot faster than you actually are. There's a really good wave turn on this where you get sideways airtime. There's a really good stall in here. The airtime is fantastic. That first inversion after the drop is fantastic. There's some interesting stuff on here that I haven't experienced on an RMC before, where you do kind of there's some moments like where you do kind of like these flat left turns, and you get pulled to the right, like it's weird, like these flat turns like right here, and there's one that goes into the brake run. Those are really interesting. And this roller coaster is just insane, and in the back row you get whipped over. The drop, the pre-lift section is probably my favorite pre-lift section on an RMC. There's just so many little airtime pops there, and one thing you should probably know though is that the lift hill can be kind of hit a little bit at first. It goes into the lift hill kind of at a good speed, and then it kind of does like a boom, 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 and it starts off kind of slow. That's because this runs 3 trains and it doesn't have a mid-course brake run, so they have to have the train going up the lift hill slow at first until they get the train off the brake run, the third train off the brake run, so then they can fully send this, and then the lift hill about halfway up will start going faster. But yeah, this ride is fantastic. It was surprising. I wasn't expecting it to be one of my favorite RMCs, but it is. Number 4 is a personal favorite of mine, and that's Fury 325. I remember experiencing this for the first time. I went to my first visit to Carowinds back in 2017. The biggest roller coaster I had ridden before this was, I think, Goliath over Georgia, and so I hadn't really been on these huge. This was my first Giga coaster, and I remember we went straight to it after entering the park. And entering the park, it going around you and under you and everything through this tunnel and stuff, like, it makes a very good first impression when you're entering Carowinds. But we went straight for Fury, and I remember walking up to this sign and being like, oh, it's quite daunting walking up to this. It's one of the best, like, entrance signs, like, ever. And then you get it, we get on it, and I remember being blown away by, like, it was intense, it was quite twisty, there were some surprising airtime moments on here, and the speed you're going at, and that first drop is, like, it feels like you're falling forever and stuff. So this roller coaster, I remember having that experience. And then the next visit I made to Carowinds, I got to ride this at night, and that was just probably my favorite night ride. Like, and I remember riding it with my school group. I was in high school chorus that we rode this, I remember having a lot of fun with my friends on this, and it was just, every time I've experienced it, it was just so much fun. And of course, my favorite element's got to be the treble clef element here. It's like these two, you do this turn, and then you go up here, and then you do this kind of 90-degree turn where you kind of slow down a little bit, so you get a little bit of a floaty feeling there, and then you dive back down, and then you go into this tunnel, and then that whole section is just fantastic. So yeah, Fury 325. Honestly, if we were this could be a personal number one, just because of the for experiences I've had on this. But of course, it's not the number one best on this list. So the number 3 is Steel Vengeance. This is the RMC hybrid coaster at Cedar Point in Ohio. This is the best roller coaster at Cedar Point. It's really long. It's one of the longest RMCs, and all this wood structure. It's crazy. And then the first drop in the back row, there's that little speed hill right after the drop. You get insane ejector airtime. This outer bank turn is probably my favorite. Like right here, you just get this nice floater airtime while you're on the outside. It's like a weird outside turn there. And you have this cool cut back element here, and it's rather whippy, probably the best inversion on there. And then the entire second half of the ride is spent going through the structure and everything. Remember what I was talking about with Wildcats Revenge, how you're going underneath the wooden structure and everything? Well, that applies to this as well. It's crazy how you're flying through this. It feels like you're going faster than you actually are. This thing has so much airtime, and by the end, you at the end of the ride, before you hit the brake run, you go through 6 airtime hills in a row. And I know I kind of complained about that a little bit on Air Force One, but these airtime hills are better. I'd say I don't mind having 6 airtime hills in a row. These have perfect ejector airtime. They're not too much where they hurt your legs or anything. No, these are good. Yeah, this is just a fantastic roller coaster, by far best at Cedar Point. So then we got number 2. This is Iron Gwazi at Busch Gardens Tampa. Best roller coaster at Busch Gardens Tampa easily, and my favorite roller coaster by Rocky Mountain Construction. Probably the most intense roller coaster I've ridden. There's just element after element. It's not quite as long as Steel Vengeance, but I think it feels like, for some reason, I like it more. Maybe it's just because it's a little bit more intense. It feels like you're absolutely flying. And when you hit the brake run, you go into it at full speed. And I know I said on Air Force One, it's too much of an abrupt stop. But this, even though you're going into it fast, it doesn't feel like you're hitting a brick wall. It's it's like a fun sudden stop on this. And you get one of the best airtime moments right before you hit the brake run, where it's probably the second biggest drop on the ride. You do this big hill, and you get so much airtime, and then you turn left into the brake run. But the two best elements on here are the death roll here that goes underneath the lift hill. It's like you're going through a 0G roll, right? Except you're descending. And it's just one of the best inversions. Probably my second favorite inversion after the one that's coming at number 1 here in a second. But then my other favorite element is the wave turn that goes right by the station. You get ejector airtime while you're going sideways. It's just crazy. Yeah, this is just I rode in the front and the back row, and both rows are equally good. I don't have a preference personally. Every row in this is just you're getting a really intense ride. For some people, it's too much, but for me, it was perfect. So, number 1 is my favorite roller coaster I've ever ridden, and that's Jurassic World Velocicoaster at Universal Islands of Adventure. I remember I talked about how Hagrid's at the same park is a full package family coaster, how it's got all the theming you want and everything, and it's just perfect for what it is. Well, this kind of applies. The theming is not quite as elaborate as Hagrid's, but the theming on here is still really good. You got a lot of rock work and stuff, but the fact that they were able to have this level of theming on a thrill coaster, you don't get that at too many places, especially in the United States. Like you're going through this queue line, and it's one of the best queue lines. You feel like you're in there with the raptors, and you there's these raptor cages, and one of them, you have these animatronics that look so real that are kind of muzzled up, and they're shaking and their eyes are blinking and stuff. And then the cages next to them are empty. You're like, oh, where are the other raptors gone? And it's just a really good queue experience. And then you get on the ride, and when you launch, it's like the raptors are chasing you and stuff, and you have to escape the raptor paddock. And the first half of the ride is not quite as fast as the second half, but it's really whippy. You got some surprising moments of airtime here, and the rock work and stuff that you run into, and the raptor statues and stuff. It's just really cool. And then you hit the second launch. There's 2 launches on this. You hit the second launch, which is when you hit your fastest speed of, I think, 72 miles an hour, I want to say, something like that. And that's just a really good launch. It's one of my favorite launches. And you go up this top hat here, and you get a view of the whole park. I sat in the back on this, and I got 2 rides on it, by the way. And you just get, it's like it's weird. It slows you down just a little bit, so you see the whole park, and then you go flying down the other side, down this drop, and you get insane airtime. That was the best moment of airtime on the ride, was going down that top hat there. And then you go through the 0G stall, which is really nice, and then you have these wave turn, then you have an outer bank turn. You got these really whipping moments, and it goes right over the pathway in the second half of the ride. And you get really good shots of it when you're on the pathway. You get really good off-ride footage from there. And then, after that, you approach the best inversion in the world, and that's the Mosasaurus roll over the lagoon. You take this, you go over this little speed hole, and then you go through this, basically what's a heartline roll, over the water. It is it's the most whippy inversion. You feel like you're gonna get flung into the water. It's so crazy. And then you do a couple twists and turns, and then you hit the brake run. But the whole experience is just amazing, from the theming to the airtime to the intensity. Just the whole package experience. This has got to be the best roller coaster I've ever done. And it has, by far, my favorite inversion on any roller coaster ever. So that's going to do it for this list. You got Velocicoaster number 1. And that's it for this top 10 roller coasters from Mr. No Ride. So I'll see you later, roller coaster gamers. I'll try to do another one of these next year, or whenever I visit another park. I'll update this list if anything cracks my top 10. I might even have to make it a top 15. And by the way, I'm going to be on the Mardi Gras cruise in January with Coaster Studios and all them, and we're going to ride Bolt, which is the roller coaster that's on the Mardi Gras cruise. So just thought I'd let y'all know that. But that's going to do it for this, and I'll see you next time. Bye.